Thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it. It's good to see us looking at our business. Somebody asked me a little earlier today, he says, Jeff, how can you speak in an hour? Because normally it takes you an hour just to warm up and get going. So that is the challenge we have. So I'd like to start the ball rolling pretty quickly. We'll go through the handout, but before going through a handout, let me just give you some stuff, because what we're looking at here really is, for the next hour, how can I help you help yourself? And the objective is very simple. How about a roadmap, a plan and action to enable your dealership to improve profitability under current competitive conditions? The problem is I can give you the knowledge, I can give you some ideas. The action obviously has to come from you. So I wrote a couple of things before we started, and I want to talk to you about them now, because these are the hallmarks I see around the country when I visit with dealerships. I was at somebody on Friday. He's got 12 dealerships. His net profit as a percent of sales is running north of 4.5%. Some big stores, some small stores, some highline imports, and some, run-of-the-mill stuff. GM stores, buying a Ford store, just bought a Honda store. So it's a mixture, but he's got his numbers up there. So when I speak to him on Friday, when I went visiting there, because we had some things we had to discuss. I hadn't spoken to him for some time. He says, here are my benchmarks for our group. And the first one he had there was gross per employee. Gross per employee is your benchmark. It's something you have to track every month. You have to look at it compared to what you looked at it this time last year. How you're tracking year to date. How did you track for the month? So I wrote these notes at the back. I've got about 5 bullets. We will get to them, but I'd rather go and do it now, get it over with, and then add a little bit of stuff to it, but add a little color to it. Gross per employee is the highest. Why? Because your cost, the highest cost you have, is your employees. 70% of your expenses come through the personnel side of your business. So if we can get our gross per employee to be acceptable, the only thing we have to worry about is that 30% of expense that perhaps is non-personnel related. Rent and a few other odds and ends that you have there. So folks, gross per employee is the big number. It's a big one you need to track, and the guys who do well on gross per employee and their metrics are high are the ones that basically have a lot more money in the bottom line. So gross per employee, very important, which comes on to the next one, which we'll get to, but let's do it now because you guys are fresh and you're ready to rock and roll and get this thing done, is what is your ratio of productive to supportive personnel? What should it be? Well, guys, should never be below 50%. And if you've got more than 100 employees, you're closer to 60% than 50%. But it's when I give you this ratio, you say, well, Jeff, I'm at 55, I'm okay. But then I've got a caveat for you. Provided your productive people are producing at the metrics they should be producing at, which means, what are you averaging sales per sales employee, per salesperson? Is it at 12, is it at 14, or is it at 8? It's another number that's very important. So when you look at this ratio of productive to supportive, your productive people have to be in that productive band of acceptability. The next one, and the two big ones, is really what is your hours per employee, per technician per month? Big number. And yet so many, unfortunately, don't look at that number. Don't track it, don't look at it, don't monitor or manage it, and therefore we're not producing what we should. We should be close to, when I ask people around the country, how many hours should a tech produce on a daily basis? They're telling me 10. Well, 10 at 22 days a month is 220 hours. Not many people are there. I've got a client in Dallas who is there making fistful of money. 75 technicians without the recon people in there, doing an unbelievable job. But he's got a number of franchises in the Texas market, and everybody's above 200 hours per tech per month. So guys, Are you at 200? Which is just 9 hours a day per tech. So that's the number we got to look at. Let's take a look at something else. Who are your 2 most productive gross employees in your organization? Who produces the most gross? Who generates the most gross in your organization? There are 2 positions. And you can't have modest, mediocre people in those 2 positions. They're your service advisors and your F&I managers or producers. Those are your 2 positions. You've got to have strong horses there. You don't have strong horses there, I think you've got your eye off the ball, and I say it respectfully. So think about those things, because those are the things that drive profitability. Those are your roadmap. Those are the things that make it a little better for all of us if you look at it. I know we've got a lot of things that distract us. I know we've got a lot of things that take us off true north. But true north encompasses this. So when I go and meet with this guy on Friday and we chat, all of these things come up all the time. Why? Because he's done this for a long time. He sends people to, he's always been a very great supporter of our GM workshop, so his managers know that stuff. And they come back and they execute. Another thing we have to appreciate, the quality of gross. The quality of gross in fixed is so much better than the quality of gross in variable. You say, what the hell is this guy talking about? Now he's got a funny accent, and I know he comes from the West Coast, and what's his deal? Well, the quality of gross is how much of that goes to the bottom line. And the quality of gross in fixed is so much better than the quality of gross in variable, because the amount that flows through to the net profit bottom line is much higher in fixed operations than in variable operations. So looking at a number, what percentage of your total gross should come out of fixed operations? The public caps are running around about 42 to 45% of their total gross. So if you want to go do a calculation, that's where they're going. Now, if you put a lot of your gross below the line, packs, rebates, and other stuff, just remember that the public caps put it above the line because they want to show it as gross. So do your calculations and see if you're in that kind of bandwidth. Now, if you're at 55%, you say, well, I'm real comfortably high, then my question comes to you is, do you have market share? And do you have enough used car business? And do you have enough adequate front-end gross? So that's that. Interesting thing, the guy who I went to see is in the metro market in Los Angeles. He spends nothing on newspaper, not one bit. Used to spend $300,000 a month. Those were years ago. He spends nothing. Because what's happening is our business is shifting. It's shifting more to digital. It's shifting more to changing where our media is. We'll discuss a little of that, but that's something that's very important for us. Last thing before we start this session, really, is make sure your pay plans are aligned to what you are wanting to accomplish. For example, why are you getting reports from the manufacturer on service retention? Why are we not paying our service manager and our service advisors on service retention? I don't know. Isn't it the logical thing to pay them on so they can behave and get customers to come back? The answer is absolutely. So just a couple of thought starters. We can now go through the stuff and see what it says and get our ways through it, and hopefully we can finish in an hour. Please interrupt, ask a question, challenge, have no problem. Love to be involved. I am here for the rest of the session. I'll be sitting in the corner, so down the road you can always come visit and we can talk about stuff if you need to. All right, this is your SARs that are coming out, and we've done well. And we're doing well and continue to do well. I think things are slowing down a little, but the problem we have is we're still seeing some compression on our net profit. We're seeing net profit challenges, and we want to get that going, so that's a challenge we have. The criteria for improving dealership profit. Manage your margins. Obviously, we want to. But you're competing with everybody else, and you've got the digital space there that's getting people to look around. So let's try and increase the gross profit on every transaction where applicable. And we do a great job normally in F&I checking on transaction, checking on penetration. But then it comes back to my comment earlier, how are we doing with service advisors? Do we track them as much as we track F&I guys? Nowhere near. So that's something where you can pick up the pace there. Look at every sales opportunity to expand your transactional footprint, and sales opportunities here is in your digital marketplace. Let's make sure we're effective. I'll give you a little report, it's embedded in here, that basically will tell you if you're getting to where you need to get to. Okay? But these are the two things we need to do to get there. Personnel management, please manage your ratio of productive to supportive. Please manage it. And anybody who produces gross is productive, and everybody else, most of us in this room, we're supportive. I could have said you're not productive and you wouldn't like that, but you're supportive. Okay? You're supportive. We don't have productive and unproductive people. We only have productive and supportive people. So let's make sure we're going down that road to get that in line. Contain personal costs by improving your gross per employee. Now you're going to say contain personnel costs, because we always come up with a situation where when we have a net profit problem, we say, well, it's an expense problem. And quite often, it's either a gross problem or an expense problem or a combination. But increase your grosses, and your expense, if they were to stay static, as a percentage becomes lower. So, you know, we really got to contain our personal costs. We've got to keep our comp in line. So we always do it, and the best way is let our people sell 12, 14, 15 cars a month with adequate gross. We don't have a problem then when it comes to paying them because they get paid. Where we have a problem is somebody sells 6, and then we've got minimum wages, we've got advances, and it becomes more complicated. So it's a very tough deal, but that's where we've got to do. So let's keep our lines in there. Improved your fixed absorption. I'd like you to build that number up as much as you could. I'd like you to get your managers involved with that metric. I'd like to see maybe managers paid off achieving certain percentages, because it makes everybody work together on what we're trying to do. So that's very important for us. Okay, looking at your gross per transaction, the problem we have is that our grosses are going down. This is our public companies. I've been privileged to work with every one of them. Not all now. Some of them have kind of moved away from me a little. Some are coming back. But I've worked with all of them. I understand where they're going. The one that you've got to watch out for here is Penske, because over 50% of its business is out of the country. So it's not really true looking at everything the same way. Have a little problem there with Group 1. They've got some of them are in Brazil, which is really hurting their F&I income, but they're also in the UK as well. So just a little aberrant, but nothing much. But really what's telling us is our percentages are coming down. If we want to look at gross per unit, we're looking at the gross per unit, and it shows you the same. We're down quite a bit. So when we say let's try and get as much gross we can, we do, but we have some headwinds. We have some headwinds, and you see it, I see it, and it's a tough deal, and it's tough what we do. So what do we look at? We look at other markets, and here's the question I have to you. When we look at accessories and add-ons, on a scale of 1 to 5, where are you? What kind of job do you do? How good do you do it? Are you at a 5 or are you at a 1? Well, I'll tell you what most dealerships are at after this. 9 out of 10 consumers purchase accessories for their vehicles. 6 out of 10 will purchase about $1,500. The majority will buy within the first 90 days, yet fewer than 5% of our dealer body does. We're not in the accessory and add-on business. Even though accessories are a hot commodity in the eyes of most consumers, most dealers don't see accessories the same way. Which comes on to something else with pay plans. Pay plans hurt each other. Pay plans are basically create interdepartment rivalry and vertical thinking. For example, salespeople, if they don't have a leg on the F&I side of the business, aren't very keen and very helpful in trying to get F&I products sold. Vice versa. Let's look at your service manager and your used car manager. Always constant niggling and friction and everything else. In the meantime, they're both working for the same thing. We want to get cars in and out. We want to get them sold. We want to get some gross. We want to get some back-end income. All of us together. What hurts accessories and add-ons is very simple. Do work for GST, Gulf States Toyota. They came out with a great program for the dealers. It died in the weeds. Why? Well, they looked and said, why is the reason? It's quite easy. If you're going to expect the same markup, traditional markup, from the parts manager, you know how flexible he is. If you're going to get the same from the service manager, you know how flexible they are. And if you want to get the same from the F&I manager with the same markup, guess what happens? We're non-competitive. So pay plans here actually hurt us and hinder us rather than say, look, we're getting about $1,500, which comes out to maybe about $400 or $500 a pop. I want that money. Let's not worry about pay plans. Let's somehow put it into a pot, and at the end, let's share the pot amongst these three departments. 50% new cars, 30% service, 20% parts. Let's move on. Guess what happens to those companies? They're in the accessory business. So what has hindered us quite often is our pay plans. And I've seen people go from a shared pay plan to a shared pay plan in for example, new car, where they have a commission just on the front end. Now they're having a commission on the front end and the back end, and guess what happens? All of a sudden F&I income is boosted. So I wonder what happened. What happened is you aligned your pay plan to what you wanted to achieve. And the problem we have, unfortunately, is quite often our pay plans do the opposite. So doing a little math on this gives us a couple of things. Doing a little maths on this gives us a couple. If you were to sell 100 cars at a 90% closing ratios, then we'll sell 90 per month. The $1,500 per pop gives you $1.35. At a 40% gross profit margin means you got $54,000. Now, if you are selling 100 cars and you do a bad job and you only do half as well, are you okay at $27,000? It's $27,000 more than you would have had. So we've got to be in the accessory and add-on business. And that's where you're going to be able to maybe balance the loss of front-end income. Just as when I first came to this country in 1977, I stumbled on some people who were just trying to sell F&I products. I don't know, I think a lot of you guys weren't around, but it was an Oakleaf product. Oakleaf was a computer company that they had, a little thing, machine, and basically it produced extended warranty stuff and everybody else, and they were making a fortune. That was the first time ever people started looking at F&I income, and that was the first time that we started to see that grosses were going down in the front end, F&I was picking up, and now we have a situation is we couldn't exist without F&I income. Eventually we won't be able to exist without being in the accessory and add-on business, because there's not enough money there for us. There's not enough margin, and the cost to acquire it is tough unless we do a good job digitally, and then we've got to execute. So that's part of the deal we're at. Now, it's the reality and we've got to understand it, but that makes our business so intriguing and so challenging and exciting. We've got to get there. So let's look at this business, and then we come back to that question I asked. Are you in this business? On a scale of 1 to 5, where are you? And most of us, unfortunately, as an industry, we're at a 1, where we should be at a 3 going towards a 4 and a 5. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us. Take a look at it, see what you can do. The beautiful thing about our business today is we can go onto the internet and find practically everything you want. And therefore, you have got the resources there. The situation is you obviously got to execute on that. Next one really is how we're doing against the public caps. The public caps, this is their numbers. AutoNation is at 1,656. and we are looking at the second quarter 2017. So this is pretty fresh stuff. So they're doing a pretty good job. Asbury, I don't have the numbers for you, but Asbury's numbers at 1518, it's 70% of their business is product and only 30% is rate. So can we do it? Yes. Question on ordination is they're only selling about 3 or 4 products. They're not into everything. They don't do etch because they say it's not dealer friendly to them. Doesn't get a guy back into service. Lithia, which really was doing exceptionally well, but picked up a very large acquisition that was doing actually quite badly. They're lifting up their numbers all the time, and I'm sure they'll get to above 13 very shortly. So all in all, they sell oil changes for life on their cars. Do they get customers to come back? Absolutely. Why? Because they know the quality of gross in service is better than the quality of gross in variable. So they're doing that, and it's working very well for them. I said earlier that the marketplace, we've got to get into a digital footprint. Digital footprint's a very simple thing. I've seen a lot of dealers come and say, Jeff, I just need to spend more on the digital side. I need to spend more to create lead providers. I need to spend more on these guys because if I do that, I'll get more business. And I said, yeah, you'll get more business. You may be able to double the amount of people. But what is your percentage of people that you basically get into your store based on then coming in and going onto your digital marketplace? I said, what percentage? I said, well, there's a very easy way to do it. And this is how we do it in order to try and get there. We basically say, there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to get a closing ratio that makes sense. So before you go out and buy more leads, why don't you look at the leads you have and do a good job there, and then maybe we'll be able to do something a little better down the road. So, a good job here. Of every 100 leads you receive, of them, how many do you establish two-way communication? Now, if you don't have two-way communication, I'm not going to get the guy in. So my first step is, how many did you have two-way communication? And two-way communication is not hi, thank you for the email that's done. You've got to get them involved. So to get them involved, if I was in this area, I'll probably be talking about football. So I said, hey, did you see the last game? We played pretty good. I'm a Buckeye State fan. What are you? Not bad. That's called personalization. But still, let's talk about it. How many do we establish two-way communication? We've got to track this. We've got to track this on every lead we have. What do we find? We should be at 60%. 60% will get us the top of the funnel, but we now got to work to the rest of the funnel. Of those who established two-way communications, how many appointments did you make? I've got to be at 60%. Of those appointments you made, how many showed? 60%. And of those who showed, how many purchased the vehicle? 60%. So we track this all the time. And dealerships that track us discover that they work very hard at getting the top of funnel to have more people. Because if you only had 50% here and these things worked out to 70%, you'd never improve your closing ratio that much. You'll still be well below 13%. I'd rather have 75% here than anywhere else because it gives me more to the funnel. So let's work on how do we become better here rather than always saying, I've got to get more leads. So before you go for more leads, I need you to do your due diligence. Doing your due diligence here will basically help you a lot. Now, best in class for responses to get two-way communication, a price quote. What percentage of people want a price? Practically everybody. What percentage of people get a price? 26% or something. It's got to move up. Got to give a price because the guy comes to you, he wants a price. You don't give him a price, he moves on. Okay? The amount of people who will not go to the original, where the original e-lead came to, is incredibly high. It's up in 85% of people will not go to the person they originally made the contact with, the e-lead contact with. So we've got to give them a price if they're asking for a price, because most of them do. It's not a problem. Show them multiple alternate vehicles. Show them another one with a color. Show them a CPO unit. Show them something that you can start having dialogue with. Here's the beauty. 75% of people will switch the car, the model, or the color from the original one they intended when they first came to you. So they came to you and this is what they wanted. 75% will not leave with that car, but will leave with something else. So the chance of switch is available, but we've got to show them alternative vehicles. We've also got to give them some vehicle detail. Whatever, just a little bit. So they've got it and they can go and say, oh, I didn't know it did this, I didn't know it did that. Just to get them a little interested. Show them updated information regarding incentives. Please offer them a test drive. Now, it doesn't have to come within 5 minutes, but it's got to be a nice, thorough one within 20 minutes. Because what happens is when somebody says, give me the best price, and they didn't give the best price, that person's gone. He's not even part of it. So when you come in next and you give them a thorough stuff for them to look at, they look and say, wow, this guy's pretty good. And then it's got to be customized. So how do you customize it? You basically send them a dealer rater on yourself. You send them some additional information. And customization would be, today would be, wow, I've never been in Columbus where it's been so hot so late in the year. I don't know if you're suffering, as we are. And it just creates the dialogue that gets you to go to the next step. It also creates another dialogue which says to us, hey guys, are you using this car to go to work? Are you using this car for, what purposes are you using the car? Is this for community, you got some outdoor recreational activities? Yes. What do you do? Great. Have you ever thought of this car instead of that car? You have to become a counselor. Otherwise, the only thing the guy's going to do is he's going to rely on you from one perspective only, and that is, give me the best price. And I can't go down that road. So let's look at that again. The other bullet we started on is personnel. So let's talk a little deeper on this. Our focus is gross per employee. Please, please, let's do that. Productive to supportive. Bigger the store, the better you can get. Okay? So let's go down that road if we can as well. Processes aligned to generate gross and customer retention. That's why we should be paying people and recognizing people on customer retention rather than just saying it's the gross. Because getting the gross one time without getting a customer in for the second time is a problem. So what is the holistic side, which I should have put down as one of my points? What's the holistic side of a car dealership? It's very simple. You sell them a car in order to convert them to a service customer, in order for them to stay as a service customer, so that ultimately they will have enough equity on the car to create those relationships, and then I'll turn the guy around and basically will take his car off his hands, give him a new car, and now we've got a trade to sell, and he's going in with a new car. Now, your conflict there is why when a car's got 80,000, should a service advisor comfortably, easily say, let me get you into a new car because it's better for you? He wants this now, he wants this high dollar repair order to be there. So there's a conflict. So what dealerships do is they give the service advisor a spiff, but what they also do is they honor the repair order that was written as a customer pay repair order that'll also be paid to the service advisor, part of his productivity for the month. Guess what happens? We basically get a more seamless transaction, which we never had before. So folks, look at your pay plans because they kind of conflict sometimes to what you want to get. So create processes aligned to generate gross and customer retention. Why do I want customer retention? No, not that it sounds nice. I want it because I want your trade. Acquiring great trades is very difficult. And if we're going to compete with everybody at auctions and on the websites to try and get it is crazy. Let's get our customers to basically furnish us with good trades. Commitment to the process. When we look at GMs and ask what are the great attributes, what are the attributes of great GMs, the one we always miss out, and when we do this at a GM workshop. We get everybody to do their stuff, and I don't make them spend too much time on it. Only once has a guy come to me and says he's got to be committed to great process. So you've got to look at your organization, and I always use the expression, you can either look in the mirror or look out the window. Okay? And if you look in the mirror, you've got to have great process, because everything revolves around that. And the process cannot be unwieldy, it's got to be customer friendly. So visit on this concept for a second. Would you rather have a great GM surrounded by adequate process, mediocre process, or a mediocre manager surrounded by great process? And the answer, you'll tell me, I'd rather have a mediocre manager surrounded by great process. But there's kind of enigmatically, there's something wrong with the story. Because what happens is if you've got a dealership and you employ a new GM because place was floundering, the first thing a great GM will do is change process. And if he's unable to change process, he'll leave and go work for somebody where he can change process. Because process begets a lot of predictability and profitability. But they've got to be clean, they've got to be great process that can help them get there. So please look at it from that. Commitment to the process. So don't come up with a great idea. Don't go back to your organization and say, we're going to do this, because if you can't basically follow up and put a great process in place, you have a problem. For example, I tell people, should we make the first service appointment at the time of delivering the vehicle to a customer? And everybody says yes, yes, yes. And so few of us do a great job in getting that done. And then we do it, and then we forget about it, and then, oh, the reason we don't do it anymore, Jeff, we lost our appointment scheduler or something. Well, that's not a process. That was just an idea, a belief. We need a process. So let's make sure we do it. And here's the thing you say, is if you're not producing gross, you better be supporting those who do. Now, I find difficulty getting good numbers from the public caps, because only every now and then do they tell me how many people they employ, and then I can work back to find out how much gross per employee they have. And looking at their gross, and this comes from AutoNation last year, it found out their gross was about 11,152. That includes Highline imports, regular imports, Asian stuff, Korean, but they're 11,152. Please find out and ascertain what your gross per employee is. Now, the difference between you and their calculation is when you look at gross on their calculation, it takes all the packs, the holdbacks, the incentive money that went below the line now goes above the line. SFE money that you may have below the money goes above the line. It all goes into gross as much as it can. Dock fees go into gross. Anything you can basically put that belongs to a car deal or belongs to a sale of a vehicle, they will put above the line and it'll work its way through. But guys, those are their numbers. Obviously, where I was, the guy said we're at $12,000 a car, and it's across the board, but we know certain franchises will have difficulty getting to 12. But then their Lexus store doesn't have a problem getting to a higher, or their Mercedes store doesn't have a problem getting to a little higher than that. So work out your number, start getting your people to understand where you want to get to, and that's probably going to help you a lot to get to your next level. So gross per employee is something we want to look at. Let's take a little bit and look at improving unit volume if we could. And if we want to look at unit volume, a couple of things. Goal is 1-to-1, at least. In actual fact, NADA statistics probably would suggest that we're probably at about a 1-to-1 as we speak. So 1-to-1. I always ask two questions. What percentage of your inventory is less than 30 days old? What's the percentage we want? Good question. So we're looking at this and saying, what should we be at? And I'll show you what we should be at. We should be more than 70% of our inventory should be under 30 days old. Then the other question is, how many of your oldest 10 vehicles in inventory were purchase units? If you've got more than 2, I'm saying, who put a gun to your head and said you've got to buy a car that is now your oldest car in inventory? Truly does not make sense. I know we fell in love with a car, and the worst scenario I can see, the worst optic, is when you say to a used car manager, why did you buy that car? And he says, boss, I just got a good feeling about this one. You buy that car because days to market is such, because pricing to market is such, because there's a gap and we say we sell these kind of cars and we've got true tracking of the stuff. We should be treating used cars as we treat parts inventory. When we do parts inventory, do a segment of parts inventory and say, why do you buy this part? Why did you order this part? And the answer is because it sells. We do all the tracking of it so that we know there's a 95% chance we'll sell it. CarMax, 99% of all the cars they put on their lot for sale will sell within 60 days. 99%. So folks, how do they do it? Because when they go to the auction, they know exactly what they're going to buy. Everybody laughs at them and say, you know, they pay top dollar. Everybody laughs at them. In the meantime, 99% of what they do is making money, and their gross per unit, I know there's a little bit of an accounting deal, is higher on average than the gross for the public caps. So it's not a bad deal. Now you're going to say, Jeff, why the hell did you get to 70%? Answer is real simple. Want to take a look at probability of sales. So get yourself 3 buckets. First bucket, 0 to 30, probability of sale between 65 and 70%. My grosses are up $2,000 maybe, close to $2,000, depending on market. My next bucket, 20 to 25% probability of sale. My grosses are going to be down a little, 1,400. Third bucket, my probability of sale is 10 to 15%, and I've got $500 out there. So that's where we're going. You can truly understand that my gross per unit starts to drop. Yet, ironically, my cost per sale goes up as we give spiffs and bonuses to move old product. Double dip, double whammy on the negative side. Low grosses, high cost of sale. So, when you take this and take the inventory coupled with the probability of sale, we see some interesting things occurring. Number one, I started with 100 cars. I sell 70 in my first bucket. I'm left with 30. When I take the 30, I have a probability of sale of 6. I now bring it down to 24. My third, I start with 24. I have a 10% probability, even if it's a low gross, and I'm going to have 21 cars lying there. Folks, 21% of your inventory is going to be in the third bucket, and if you wholesale it, the difference between wholesaling on day 1 and wholesaling it on day 90 is about $900. So, do we have to become students of inventory? Yes. Do we have to understand the probability of sales? Yes. Do we have to accelerate our urgency to move a car from day 1 rather than to say, well, boss wants a car out by day 60, so on day 58, let's start doing something. That costs way too much money for us. So it all starts with psychologically understanding where you want to get, and the belief factor. I cannot afford 21% of my cars to go over 90 days old. Just cannot afford it. And that's what we look at all the time. Another thing I look at also that for me makes sense is when I look at gross per unit and somebody's boasting that their gross per unit is high, I immediately look at wholesale loss. And I normally take retail profit and wholesale loss together to find out what my gross per unit is retail for that month. Because that gives me a little bit of look in the mirror rather than look out the window kind of deal. So folks, look at this and start accelerating decision making. Make tougher decisions sooner rather than later. Start moving inventory. If something doesn't sell, has no action after 30 days, there is no harm in taking it to the auction, breaking even maybe, and buying something that does sell. But don't fall in love with inventory, because it doesn't help down the road, because it's all bricks and mortar. Okay, absorption. We're looking at absorption a little bit. The story here is very simple. I want to improve my fixed gross. I want to reduce my total fixed expenses. Who can help us? Every manager in our organization can help us. So paying people off absorption is not the worst thing in the world. In actual fact, it probably gets everybody to become a little more accountable on accountable stuff. Next, here's your economies in a dealership. It's very simple. If I were to do 200 hours a month, which is what I'd like you to do, at $86, and this comes from a composite that I got of, I think, a Honda group, my annual labor sales would be $208,000. At 74% gross, I'm at $154,000 worth of gross profit, because I'm at 74% of 208. My parts to labor ratio is 0.82. That's what it is. I'm not asking to be high or low, but you can do the calculation back at the store. My part sales is $1.70 based on 0.82 multiplied by 208. Therefore, my gross is at 37% is 64 grand, and my total gross per tech is $218,000. So each tech produces 218. Interesting, a couple of weeks ago, I had some guys from Canada attend a workshop in Dallas. They were way lower than this. They were in 25%. When they went back, they just changed their computer system to come up to this, and the return on investment was unbelievable for coming to the store. Two large Toyota dealers in the east side of Canada. One was in Moncton and one in Fredericton. So all I'm asking for us is to look at this and say, wow, what's our job? Our job is to get all our techs to be producing 200 hours. Once we get them at 200 hours, we're short of techs. What's your job now? It's get the next tech. But we've got to get this done. We've got to get our stuff done. Now, you can say to me, Jeff, I'm at 150, and I'll say, you can't get to 200 quickly unless your hours per repair order on customer pay is very, very low. And then if you just get them to average, you'll pick up some hours. But if your average hours per RO is pretty good, the only way I can pick up this is to start getting business to come in that starts very, very organically and very slowly, and we've got to work our way through that, and that takes time. So I'm overemployed. Now it's interesting, I have some clients, two very large dealer clients in Puerto Rico. I've managed to contact the one, I haven't contacted the other, but this guy had a problem in service for many years. And like a typical car dealer, I'm working on other things, and I said, Juan Alberto, I can handle this. He says, Jeff, we never worry about service, we never make money. I said, no, I can get you to make money. Not a problem. He was losing like $1 million a year. I said, we can get you to make money. I said, but it's going to take you 14 months. And his answer to me, his comment to that was, why so long? I said, you've lost money for years. And he's saying, why so long? I said, it's going to take about 14 months. And it was all a case of getting your service department to be scalable to the amount of service you had. I couldn't pick up more in hours per repair order, then I'd have to go and pick up in better customer retention strategies. Customer retention will take you 8 months before you see a blip. And most of us, unfortunately, we love instant gratification, especially on the variable side. If it doesn't work after 3 months, we drop the program. Can't drop the program. Got to keep on it all the time. So every technician is giving me about $218,000 worth of gross for a Honda store. If we did this I did this for a Cadillac store, it was much higher than this. If that's higher, you're going to have higher numbers at the bottom. So all of these things work wonderfully well. Now, here's the other side, because we ask this question all the time. How much gross do you make per flat rate hour in your dealership? And people kind of start getting a twitch and they do stuff. But nobody says to me, Jeff, my gross per average hour, parts and service, labor and parts is so much. And then they know if they can do 10 hours more, how much it's going to make for them. We do this in variable all the time. We basically say if we could sell one more car per tech, per salesperson, this is how much money we're going to make. This is absent when it comes to service. And I'm saying, no, it's part of service. So if I divided the 2,400 hours into the 218, my gross per hour of labor is $91, which is pretty good. Okay? Now, when I say pretty good, it's a nice number for just an hour of labor if you're at 86 bucks an hour. That means for every hour of labor, I'm producing more than that in gross per hour. We need to work our way through this and say, I need to acquire more hours. That's our job, that's our manifesto and our organization, because it's going to help so many things. So very, very important number for us. It makes a hell of a lot of sense, and that's it. Now, before we go further, I want to give you one statistic that probably is not used, but I'm now seeing it being used in the public cap arena, and that is growth or percentage change in customer pay RO count. Notice I'm not talking about labor, I'm not talking about parts, because those things change. I'm talking about RO counts. I want to know what percentage change in your RO count this year versus last year, this month versus the same month last year. I want to see percentage change in RO count. Why? Because that tells me whether customers are coming back to you. And it's a combination of everything. It's a combination of what your facility looks like, your CSI, your hours of operation, the cost per repair order, the follow-up system, electronic scheduling abilities. It tells you if people vote and come back to your store. And that tells you. So what happens? I'm looking for percentage change, and I've got to tell you, we have an abysmal record in the car business. So that's what we have, and it's something we want to do. And I'll show it to you in a while. It's over there. Now, these you don't see, but the next 3 slides, but I want to share it with you because they're so important to us. Folks, as people own their cars longer and visit the dealership, the revenue per visit increases. Do we agree? At 80,000 miles, a guy's going to spend more money than at 8,000, correct? So we know that. Therefore, we'd love to have people basically stay with us. But people will not stay with us unless we do a good job down there. And a good job down there is pretty tough on our staff because they say, I'm not getting much juice on this transaction. No, you're not. Your juice comes here. It's called delayed gratification. You've got to do the right things there to earn the rewards over there. So that's the one side of the graph. The other side of the graph is also very interesting, and that is, as people own cars longer, so they leave us. So there's a normal attrition, and that attrition goes down as people own their cars longer. So here's where we are at a dealership. Draw this chart and go over it with your folks, because here's what it is. I retain my customers the most when they spend the least. I retain our customers the least when they spend the most. Change that around, and you can make a lot of money. Okay, now why? Because try to move this intersect to the right. If you move the intersect to the right, 2 things will happen. You'll have more ROs being written at higher dollar amounts. That's synergistic. And everybody's going to be happy. Your customers will be happy to spend more because they've been there longer. But here's the other deal. Now you're getting more customers coming back. They're acquiring equity each time they come back. So the question you have is, what would you rather be dealing with? An 80,000 mile customer or an 8,000 mile customer? I'd rather be dealing with an 80,000 mile customer because they are giving me more revenue per visit and they're 80,000 miles closer to buying their next car. So there's a lot of work here. I know it's easy. I come here, I fly out tomorrow morning, I'm going back to San Diego, I've got some meetings to attend to. I leave. I don't have the heavy lifting. You guys have to go back and institute. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of dedication, but we got to get there. Now, two things we got to do to get here. What we got to do to get here is a couple of things. I got to start with all customers coming back for service. What do I mean by all customers? Jeff, you can get all customers. I'd like to get all customers. And I'd like to know which customers should be coming back and haven't come back so I can reach out to them and get them to come back. So if I start with more customers, this will move to the right. All I'm trying to get is this intersection to go to the right all the time. Now, that's if the attrition rate remains the same, the slope of attrition, I call it. Now, how do I improve the slope? How do I make that slope become a little more gentle? Simple. Sell more dealer-friendly products. Extended service contracts, maintenance contracts, tires for life, oil changes for life. Obviously, it must make sense, but sell things that make customers come back. I know people have got Toyota say, well, you know, Toyota Care takes care of it. Yeah, it does up to 25,000 miles. What happens thereafter? Well, at 30, we hit them with a huge repair bill, so they never come back again. Instead, what we should be doing is selling them something called Toyota Care Plus to keep them going to 50,000. Because the more they can come into the dealership without them having real situations of negativity, the more times they'll come back to you. You'll own the customer. So sell them dealer-friendly products. And the last thing you've got to do is you've got to sell them tires. So therefore, tires have to be sold, and you have to match anybody else's price in the area. So when we deliver a car to a customer, let them know that we will meet or beat any tire price in the area. You've got to be selling tires. If you don't sell tires, here's what happens. 75% of the people who buy tires elsewhere stay elsewhere. You've got to be in the tire business. You're not in the business to make gross on tires. You're in the business to sell tires in order for you to get there. What is your percentage benchmark? Your percentage benchmark is 10%. 10% of all customer pay repair orders should have had tire sales. When I say tire sales, sets of tires. Now, how do I know? I get people come into our GM workshops and say, well, we're in the tire business, yeah, we sell tires. And they bring with them 50 customer pay repair orders, sequential. And then we find out that they don't sell tires to, they do sell tires, but it's all to the used car manager. They don't sell tires to the customer. And that's a problem. So guys, we've got to align our process to what we want to achieve. We want to align our pay plans to what we need to achieve. Okay? So those are something we want to do. This came out last year, which was the first time it ever came out to her. And we used to get this from Stevens that shows an increase in percentage change of customer pay repair orders. We've got to look at this every month. We've got to see how do we improve it. And actually, as a industry, we're not doing any better than before. In actual fact, we're replacing customers that we've lost with new customers, and sometimes not at the same rate. But I'm saying to you, a quality of gross in service is better than a quality of gross in variable. So please start looking there and become a student. So the questions we ask in service are very simple because we need to get to where we need to get to, and then I'm pretty much close. We ask every day how many hours we produce and what is your effective retail labor rate. We do this every single time. Why? I know how many hours should be produced, at least 9 hours a day per tech. You've got 10 techs, that's 90 hours. You've got 2 technicians, 2 service advisors, that's 45 hours per tech, per service advisor. Guys, not difficult stuff. The service game is to produce more hours by converting more sales customers into service customers, by retaining more of these customers, and improving margins by improving labor alignment, and lifting hours per RO if applicable. You don't oversell, and please try to be conservative on your hours, on your dollars per RO, because the customer will eventually start to compute and say they're more expensive than me going to Jiffy Lube. We've got to make sure that they see us as being effective in the marketplace. Don't lift hours per repair order by having a pay plan that says I'm going to pay you on hours per RO, because guess what that does? It makes you chase hours per RO, and you'll get a new customer coming in, Auntie Dorothy, and for a repair order that she's got under 15,000 miles, she leaves with $380 on a repair order. Why? Because your pay plan dictated your behavior. I've always said, show me the pay plan and I'll create the job description. And I really mean it, because our behavior is dictated. By the way, I normally don't, but I did bring some job description promos on that back table there. If somebody's interested, you can talk to me about any pay plans you have, because it's really that part of the business that we struggle with on behavior, and it could be aligned so much easier by saying, come up with a pay plan that makes sense to everybody and to the customer, and guess what happens? The behavior changes. And that's what works out. So that's that. The concept of flow through, I've already chatted with you. What percentage of incremental gross profit that is generated by the dealership flows through to the bottom line? And the answer is, I did this for a group, and it says that 86% of the gross flowed through to the bottom line. So if you increase each technician's production by 1 hour per day, and you've got 10 technicians, you're going to have 10 technicians, let's say at $90, $900, you're going to keep 86% of the 9 bottom line. Is that not wonderful? And that's our business model out there. How to improve fixed gross? Concentrate on increasing hours produced in the service department by increasing the number of repair orders written, and hours per RO if appropriate. And then you can also do some other stuff like effective retail labor rates and all that stuff. Undertake due diligence with each and every service customer. I have a dealership that basically says, give me all customers got over 30,000 miles in less than 1 hour, and sort it out by service advisor. And they have a meeting every day. Guess what happens to the hours? But they also do another thing. They couple it and say, give me a listing of all customers who have less than 15,000 but had more than 1 hour, because they don't want them to oversell when they think they shouldn't. So it's kind of interesting. Maintain high customer retention. As odometer readings increase, so do hours per repair order. It's a very interesting things. Get into the tires, the maintenance, and oil change policies. Please do not oversell. Now, increasing ROs written, improve customer retention, convert sales to service, and keep your customers coming back. Start creating a process of making that first service appointment at time of delivery of the car. Isolate which salespeople are not doing it. Train them first, and isolate which ones aren't doing it. I have a dealer that pays their salespeople. If more than 85% of their customers come back for the first service, they get paid. It's interesting. Hyundai has a statistic. It says, what percentage of your customers did you make the first service appointment for? What percentage of those customers came in for the first service? The one is called service appointments made. The other is called service appointments kept. It tells you, create a pay plan around that so that people start to behave in order to meet their pay plan. And it works. Hyundai started years ago by paying people when they made the first service appointment. They're not doing it anymore. They say, we will pay you if they come in for their second service appointment. Why? They want to see the process in place. And I fully understand that. So let's convert sales customers to service. Some people even identify exactly who didn't come, where we didn't make the first service appointment. And every day they go and say, how come you didn't make a service appointment with such and such, and you delivered the car yesterday? Make people accountable. Improve vehicle sales, new, used, CPO, because that's all going to help your business, okay? So those are the ones we want to do. and this is dig deeper, steps to improve dealership profitability. We're coming to the end of it. Stuff I've covered already. Personnel probability. Track gross profit objectives by position. Manage the ratio productive to supporter. Hold people accountable. Expense control, everything as an expense as a percent of gross if you can. Do you have an expense issue or a low gross issue? Align your staff according to your volume. Variable, you can pop your volume up quickly. Fixed, you can't. Is your parts department part of your service department or not? Generally speaking, if you don't have a big wholesale footprint, 85–90% of all the activities actually of his service department. That's an interesting thing. We pay the back counter guy, whose only customer is service. We pay them on hours produced in the service department rather than on something which is meaningless, is front counter sales or wholesale sales. We pay them hours produced in the service department. Why? Because that's the customer. Asset management. Align your inventories to the sales rate. Aggressively manage aged inventories. I try to instill some, not fear, but action by saying 70% of your inventory should be under 30 days old. If you saw two guys with inventories, one had 70% of his inventory under 30 days, another guy had 12% of his inventory over 30 days, who's better positioned? You know. We all know. So let's go do monitor, manage, and adjust. All right. Gross per employee, let's track it. We need to get to your number. 9,300 could be a Kia or maybe a Hyundai store, but that wouldn't be a good number for a BMW store or a Porsche store or a Mercedes store. So let's go for that. Fixed absorption, 75% is low-hanging fruit for some, but is very good for others. Hyundai wouldn't get to 75%. They'd be happy with 50 at the moment. But it also shows that they have some great exposure if business were to slow down. So we want to get them to be better. Look at your numbers and say, this is what I want to work on over the next year. Let's get there. I want our guys to produce more than 180 hours. And there's another thing in the statistics for service that's very important. Over 50% of your total service personnel, over 50% should be technicians producing over 180 hours per month per tech. Look at your numbers. Everybody who works in service, your warranty clerk, cashier, service advisors, service manager, count everybody. If you're not more than 50% here, you're not scalable. You haven't scaled your department appropriately. And then if you say, well, Jeff, I'm more than 50%, but you're only producing 140 hours per month, well, if I scrape off 5 of those guys, then they'll be at 200. Now you're out of kilter again. So look at those numbers. They will drive net profit performance. Be at least market effective with appropriate gross profit. Improve used to new at 1:1. You need to be above 1,200. You see the public caps can be there. Service, improve RO count and labor hours produced. Parts, avoid obsolescence and push to improve level of service. Robust, accurate, proactive accounting stuff. Avoid write-offs, please. That's what kills the margins. Avoid write-offs. Don't say, okay, well, I've got a percentage of my cars are overaged, therefore I'll do this. That just kills your grosses. Be proactive. Don't get into that stage. Don't get into that stage. Keep expenses in line. Best way to keep expenses in line, produce a hell of a lot of gross. Really, I know it's weird to say that. Produce a hell of a lot of gross. It gives you more wiggle room. Okay? And then work out down and do more with less, because that's where we need.